On the day they faced the soul-devouring dark magic, he fell into a deep sleep, leaving his companions behind. But then, 300 years passed. The peace that had been restored in the calm everyday life were nothing but illusions. Even now, in that world, everything was shrouded in darkness. When he turned 13, a hero came to meet him in the magic tower. She had snow-white hair and golden eyes, and said she had heard praises about the prodigy mage who appeared once every 100 years. She asked if he was that boy, wasn't he? And this was Archmage Ring, only 13 years old. But Ring simply ignored the heroine and continued organizing his books. She asked if he could not hear her. Ring replied that he was not a genius or just a child. He had a name, didn't she know? She then asked if he really was the youngest 4-star archmage in the history of the Empire. Ring. She had come to the right place, but he was still just a child. It was even hard to call him a prodigy when he still needed diapers. She teased him, saying that if he accepted her proposal, she could change his diapers every day. But when Ring summoned a fireball to burn her to ashes, she quickly apologized. The heroine hit her head on one of the bookshelves and was buried under the falling books. At that moment, even Ring couldn't help but laugh. From then on, he found himself quite interested in her. She introduced herself as Lista Alter. She was a false warrior of the Church of the Radiant Dragon. Right then, she asked Ring for help. Help to defeat the abyss that was approaching from the South Pole. In other words, she invited him to join the hero's party. Two well-known individuals were already part of Lista's group. The renowned archer of the Empire, Kiss, and the priestess of the Fire Dragon, from the Draconic Republic, Frey. Ring said he wasn't interested in dying, but he asked if the other two were as interesting as her. Lista replied that they weren't as crazy as she was, but there was something even more fun. She said, the world is more interesting. Those words echoed strangely in Ring's mind. He was someone who had spent his entire life studying magic in the tower. His goal was to become the highest-ranked 7-star mage of the Empire. It was said that upon reaching the 7th star, one could discover the ultimate truth of this world. He wanted to reach that realm where no one else had ever arrived. Living there, reading magical books for the rest of his life. Didn't seem too bad, but to master 7-star magic, he needed to know the world outside the tower. Still, traveling aimlessly sounded like a troublesome nuisance. He wondered if he truly needed all that. Then that clumsy heroine appeared, asking him to save the world. That unexpected proposal was enough to pull him out of his comfort and lead him into the outside world. Although he did not have a burning desire for justice to save the world, he accepted her proposal. Later, he met the archer Kiss, who inexplicably could only hit his targets when drunk, and who never spoke. Then there was Freed, the priestess who looked like a chimney, always smoking non-stop, blowing black smoke into his face and laughing like a lunatic. And yet, even in those ridiculous moments, these heroes proved to be incredibly competent. The very moment a creature appeared, it was struck in the eye by one of Kiss's arrows and had its head blown off by a torrent of Freed's flames. They were extremely powerful, the wild monsters they faced on their journey, as well as the Abyss's servants near the pole, were no match for them. Lista always teased Ring, telling him not to fall in love with her, even though she knew she was very charming, but in the end, she was the one who cared most for him. She worried that he was too naive and might be deceived by some other girl. 5 years passed like that. As their journey to save the world from the abyss neared its end, Ring's body began to show signs of deterioration. It was the result of being under constant enemy attacks for 5 years. Just before the final battle against the abyss, he was dying, consumed by a venom that corroded him with no end in sight. Lista begged him to wake up, but Friede could not break the curse. There was no cure at all. Ring said he didn't want to die. Lista was desperately trying to find a solution, but Ring told them not to worry too much. He revealed a seal carved into his chest and abdomen, the inferior seal of the Lord, an enchantment of immortality engraved into his heart. A spell that would put his body into hibernation and heal him. He had no idea how long it would take for him to awaken, but it was the only option left. His body began to freeze over, protecting him, and Ring said that one day he would return. He asked them to at least win the battle. Lista promised that they would meet again, and she asked if he truly promised to come back. When he returned, the 4 of them would explore the world once more, and she swore she would stay by his side until he awakened. And so, Ring promised. He wanted to return, but his consciousness was being dragged into the cold embrace of death, a sensation of floating and emptiness as if he were sinking into a swamp. While he was drowning, the others fought to avenge him, to defeat the abyss once and for all. Their journey to explore the vast world together ended before the abyss, but the only thing Ring could see was darkness. When he grew tired of struggling against that endless void, he suddenly found himself before the light once more. At that moment, a woman asked if Rain was all right, and he realized it was his mother. But then he thought, wait a second, I have a mother? Wasn't he an orphan? That was when he noticed the sunlight burning against his face and wondered where on earth he was. Before continuing, I must say something to you all. Nearly half of the people watching these videos aren't subscribed. That's right, you scoundrel. Watching without subscribing. Go ahead and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell and leave a like, because it really helps us out. Alright, now let's continue. Rain's mother asked why he was acting so strangely. This was the Plaza of Heroes. He had been there before. In the center stood a statue built in honor of the heroine's party, and there they were. Kiss, Lista, Pride, and Ring, the four heroes of that world. Rain then asked his mother what year it was. Of course, it was a strange question, but she answered anyway. It was the year 1418 of the Teresian calendar. Rain wondered if this meant he was in the year 1418. Had he been reborn into another body, or had his memories simply been overlaid onto someone else's body? The sensations were strange. Everything felt as if it had happened only yesterday. Lista's laughter, kisses, drunken silence, Pride's endless smoke. He wondered if all of that had really happened 300 years ago. Then he asked an almost nonsensical question. Did they actually win the final battle? But Rain quickly reasoned, of course they did. That's why this statue is here. That's why the sky is clear and peaceful. His mother confirmed it as well, saying it was obvious they had won. She added that if he went to the Vatican Tower now, he would still be able to see the frozen remains of Mage Ring. Rain wondered again if he had possessed another's body. His mother explained that Lista had remained by Ring's side until the day she passed away. It was truly sad, but at the same time, beautiful. At that moment, Rain found himself smiling. He said it was incredible that she had kept her promise. Then he approached the statue and said that there was someone who hadn't kept their promise. That person was him. Later, Rain began to research. He didn't know exactly what others had said about him, but what he found was that he had become a historical figure. The emperor himself had erected a monument in his honor, and many magical towers and mage families revered him as a saint, the great Mage Ring. But what 300 years had truly left him with was only magic. The memories of traveling across distant lands, of the radiant smiles of his companions had already become legends, no longer memories. Once, Lista had told him that memories only become true memories when they are shared with someone. And so, his memories were not yet memories. Until he could meet them again, they would remain only within his heart. They were the things he had to live with alone. They echoed in his mind like unanswered questions. Now they were gone, but they had left behind a beautiful world. So Rain asked himself what he should do now. Then he remembered, he still had a task to fulfill. The Holy Human Empire divided mages into 7 ranks, from 1 star to 7 stars. In the end, Ring had achieved the rank of a 5-star mage. In the Empire's entire history, only 2 people had ever reached the level of 6 stars, known as sages. They were said to have touched upon the very truth of the world. If he had not departed with Lista, Ring probably would have reached the 6th star, grown old, and died without ever touching the 7th. He would have regretted never leaving on that journey. Even if he could go back in time, he would accept that same proposal again. At the very least, he hoped this world would remain filled with laughter, just like Lista had once said. A world they desperately protected together. It might not have been exactly as they imagined, but those who reached the truth of the world could truly see what had happened. And so, in this life, Rain vowed to become a 7-star mage, to escape the sadness and emptiness he felt for Lista, for Pride, for Kiss, and for himself, always grumbling. His companions had always been eccentric, but he had truly loved traveling with them. Rain bid his farewell. The dead remained in the past, unable to follow, while the living were carried by the flow of time and had to move toward the future. Thus began his second life. He recalled a moment when Lista had asked him if he had a family. Ring had answered no. He had never even known the face of his mother. He was raised in the northern slums. If not for the Magic Academy's headmaster, Cirrus, who had discovered his talent and taken him in, he would have lived as an orphan and died in the streets. And Pride had once said that It was truly a shame, and Rain said that even if he had a family, he wouldn't know how to deal with them. He insisted he didn't need one, nor anything like that. But Lista had once told him not to make things so complicated. She knew he was a kind-hearted person, and said he would do well. The next morning he was awakened by his maid. She left to prepare breakfast while he got dressed. Rain thought about how his past life memories had returned to this spoiled 9-year-old boy only 20 days ago. He was now the eldest son of the Ludwig family, one of the 5 great magical houses of the empire. Once an orphan, he had been reborn this time into nobility. But Rain knew he would need effort to adapt to this new life. He was greeted by his maid, and then by his mother, who said the timing was perfect. Rain could let his father know that breakfast was ready. His father, Kevin Ludwig, mentioned that even in his sleep, Rain looked a bit tired. Probably from the journey, he guessed. Kevin then asked if his son had only come to announce that breakfast was ready. He thanked him but explained he'd come later, since he was in a rush to prepare for the presentation of his thesis. He said eating made his head heavy, and he wanted to focus on getting as much done as possible. Rain asked if that was where he had stopped. Then he offered to help his father with the magic circle. Kevin agreed, saying the help would be welcome, but warned that if Rain was late for breakfast, his mother would scold him. Rain then began a highly complex explanation, saying that magic was about expressing natural laws numerically. He noticed that one rune was in conflict with another, so he substituted it using the imperial equation 41-2. He reached the answer almost immediately. Kevin was shocked, asking if his son had really solved it. This was a difficult problem that even the top scholars of the empire hadn't been able to fix. In fact, it was a high-level spell cast more than 200 years ago. Kevin thought that if this spell could be reactivated, it might protect countless people from natural disasters like floods or landslides. But how had Rain solved it when he supposedly only knew basic magic? Judging by his magical ability, Rain was highly unusual. And yet, considering he was from the Ludwig lineage, Kevin wondered if his son hadn't simply inherited the family's magical talent. At that moment, Rain casually asked if they could have breakfast now. Kevin, pulling his son into a strong embrace, said of course they could. Later, it was explained that Rain's family was small. He had a mother, a father, and a 6-year-old younger sister, a little girl who was always peeking at him. Her name was Cirrus. She had silky black hair and crimson eyes, an adorable child who had inherited the Ludwig family's traits, just like Rain. However, she didn't like him very much, because in these inherited memories Rain had never been very kind to her. More than cold. He had been indifferent to everything. But he remembered Lista's words that he should treasure people. In this world, it seemed that everyone was wise busy. Yet she had believed in him because he had a good heart. Irritated by his own thoughts about Lista, Rain called for his sister to come into the room, asking if she wanted to learn magic or if she'd rather play. She ran off in excitement. Rain thought that dealing with children was very difficult, but a little while later she returned carrying a book. Basic Formulas for 1-Star Magic. Rain asked if she was really only 6 years old, and already reading such a book. She looked thrilled. That reminded Rain of someone he once knew, a person with boundless curiosity. Lista, who was always asking for the names of things and telling stories of faraway places. Lista had seemed so much like a child herself. And deep down, Rain had always loved those moments. So he began to explain everything to Cirrus. From the book, Rain gave simple explanations of what magical circles and squares were. He said they were like houses built from different materials. The form of the magic circle determined the attribute of the spell. A triangle was fire, a fan shape was wind. Then he explained the next step, runes. Runes were magical words. U meant bind. R meant disperse. So for example, a rune IU inside a fire triangle became a binding fire spell. But since she couldn't yet understand the math, Rain had to explain what addition and subtraction were before he could go further. The household servants who witnessed this were stunned. Their young master Rain had completely changed. He was different from the boy he had been before. Ever since that day, he visited the Plaza of Heroes. Later, when the parents found them together, they were deeply moved by the scene. Rain's mother even said she wished she could have it painted. Kevin agreed, though joked that by the time a painter arrived, they would all be grown up already. Kevin then noticed Rain was teaching magic to Cirrus. He said that ever since Rain had returned from the plaza, he seemed like a completely different person. He had even become far more mature, almost overnight. His mother asked, half joking, if perhaps their son had been possessed by Abyss. Kevin said no, but explained that he had experienced something similar once. When he was a student, he had the honor of meeting Lord Rin. At that time, Kevin was proudly boasting about becoming a 3-star mage, while Lord Rin had already risen to 5 stars during the war. Living in the peaceful era that the heroes had created, Kevin realized how complacent that had been. Perhaps Rain now carried a similar mindset. Rain's mother then asked if Rin had really been frozen in time. Kevin confirmed it, saying Rin had mastered ice magic so perfectly that he remained preserved exactly as he was at the age of 18. Beyond that, however, he knew little. But Kevin added something else. Within that ice was also Lista's magic. Only Rin and Lista themselves could awaken it. Everyone believed it was a letter, a message, left in case Rin ever returned. Kevin also told his wife that perhaps their son Rain was a genius who might one day reach the level of a sage. After all, he had solved a magical equation Kevin himself had struggled with for a whole year, just by looking at it once. She asked if that was why he had come to breakfast earlier than usual. Kevin admitted it was, and said that, though it might be a little early, perhaps it was time to teach Rain the family's forbidden magic. The art of the mage thief, capable of reading and stealing all magics. This spell was permitted only for members of the Ludwig family, but it was notoriously difficult to teach. Kevin already had an idea in mind. Later, Rain admired the land he now lived in, blue skies, vast fields of tulips, a charming region of which 1/3 belonged to the Ludwigs. The weather was perfect, so he stood to reflect. To reach great distances, one needed both medium and long-term goals. This was essential on the path to truth. The journey to become a 7-star mage was long. No matter his age, he couldn't afford to waste time. His first step was to summon his guide. Just then, Cirrus appeared and noticed that he was having some trouble. Rain asked if she wanted a guide too, and she replied with an enthusiastic yes. She became so excited that she even started to dance. Rain thought she was a little too thrilled with the idea. He then inscribed the magic circle with the runes Ju, Yu, Du, and J. The guide was an advanced spell that combined 4 elements, and only a 4-star mage could perform it. At that time, only 10 mages in the entire country had the capability. Yet Rain succeeded, summoning a towering pillar of magic. However, the strain was severe. Blood poured from his nose and eyes. He realized he was not yet ready for 4-star magic. Luckily, it was only a guide spell. Had it been an attack spell, he would have died. His body was still weak, but the summoning was successful. The guide's name was Rudian. Its purpose was to evaluate the user's abilities and identify their magical potential, essentially to advise on what to study and practice. Rain noted that, in essence, Rudian was full of the most effective runes for learning. Though it seemed simpler, it was still a 4-star spell, and Cirrus absolutely adored her new guide. Rain told her she could go study with it. Meanwhile, he felt dizzy and admitted he needed to restore some of his magic power before summoning his own guide. Later, when he examined his Rudian, it reported his current magic power at 3,024 points. He thought this was slightly below the standard for a beginner mage. His magic circle level was 77 and his resistance 64. He still had a long way to go, but then the guide detected a lineage-restricted spell manual. Rain was deemed eligible to learn Belidius and Belidius. He smiled, thinking this body wasn't completely useless after all. He remembered that, during his journey with Lista, a young mage had once approached him. That boy aspired to become the supreme archmage of the Empire and replace Rin in the hero's party. But his abilities were ordinary. Rain had nearly burned the boy to death. Ordinary though his magic was, the boy's eyes were a problem. With those eyes he could replicate any spell he saw. He could launch perfect counterattacks, even against Rin, who was the strongest mage in the world. Now Rain understood. This was the power of the Ludwig family's hereditary magic, Belidius. Simply by observing the movements of magic, one could identify which spell the enemy was casting. From there, it was possible to detect the perfect counterspell. There was also Belcurious, a legendary ocular power awakened by only 3 people in the history of the Empire. If Belidius allowed one to discern enemy spells, Belcurious granted the ability to appropriate them. For this reason, the Ludwigs were known as the Mage Thief. Their infamous reputation came from those very eyes. Rain thought to himself that now, at last, he had a clear objective. With his current magic power and resistance, it would be impossible to become a great mage like he once was. But with this body's hidden potential, there was hope. Later, Kevin approached him and asked if he was interested in learning the family's secret magic. It might be a little premature, but he could begin training. From that day forward, Helen would serve as his mentor. And when she returned to the academy, Kevin himself would become his teacher. Rain, however, couldn't quite remember who Helen was. His memory was weak. Kevin explained that Helen was an exceptional professor at the Belidian Academy, blessed with incredible magical talent. More importantly, she was Rain's aunt, who loved her nephew more than anything. At that very moment, Helen appeared in the library. She had the Ludwig family's trademark long black hair and deep red eyes. She looked at Rain and declared, "This is absurd. I didn't want to personally meet such an unprepared child." Then she turned to him and asked if he truly wanted to learn. From that point onward, she told him to address her as Professor Helen, warning that she did not tolerate slow students who failed to grasp the first lesson. Thus began his training in lineage magic. Lineage magic was carefully documented to prevent theft by outsiders, but it had to be transferred directly from one family mage to another's mind. Helen announced that she would demonstrate only once, so he had to pay close attention. The first ability she displayed was Belidius. Her eyes shone so brilliantly that Rain was struck by a familiar sensation, the same eyes as Belidius. "Impressive, isn't it?" Helen asked. "To master this, you must calculate 3 spells at the same time." But Rain confidently replied that he could do it. Helen, clearly pleased by his reaction, inscribed several formulas. He remarked that it was far more theoretical than he had expected. Inwardly, he thought that if the Ludwig family's founder had not imposed genetic restrictions, then even Rin would have gained access to this technique. Helen then asked, "It's too complex to try right away, isn't it? I can make an exception for you." But Rain shook his head. "No, it's fine. I just need to organize myself." He sincerely thanked her for the guidance and said he would continue on his own. He sat down to study, ignoring her. Helen asked if he truly didn't want her help anymore. When he kept silent, she doubted him greatly and declared, "Fine, I won't teach you later, even if you come back crying." Yet, not long after, she returned. Quietly sitting beside him, she pretended only to watch, but whenever he had a doubt, she immediately solved it for him and acted as if nothing had happened. She continued this routine for quite some time. One day, while Helen stepped away briefly, Rain's mother appeared and said, with a smile, "Your Aunt Helen is a little eccentric. She's just not very direct. In truth, she's desperate to teach you. Even if you already know the answer, you should ask her some questions." When she was younger, she was exactly the same. Later, Helen resumed her silent surveillance, clearly waiting for him to stumble. Rain thought she was extremely annoying, even more troublesome than 6-year-old Cirrus. To tease her, he deliberately asked a question, pretending he hadn't understood a passage. Helen immediately threw the book aside, proud and triumphant. "I knew you couldn't manage it alone," she exclaimed. Then she explained the concept in an overly enthusiastic manner, so much that Rain eventually got lost in the flood of words. Still, Helen's teaching style was consistent, demanding, intense and effort-heavy, but thanks to her, he drastically shortened the time needed to master the theory while also gaining valuable practical experience. On the 10th day, under her guidance, Rain felt a burning pain in his retinas. It was as if his head and eyes were about to explode. His entire vision turned blood red. At that moment, his brilliant crimson eyes bore the mark of death itself. All the information of the universe was being transmitted directly into his brain in the form of numerical formulas. Even his own magic appeared as numbers. Now he finally understood. Magic was mathematics. When he turned to Helen, she stared at him in shock. "You mastered it in only 10 days? She thought back. Even after receiving specialized education, it had taken her 7 years to acquire Belidius. People had said it would take her 70 years to fully master it. Yet, this boy had done so in 10 days. Helen realized that he might even rival the great Rin himself, the prodigy of multi-channeling. Later, she shared everything with Kevin, who was also deeply impressed. Helen told him, "Thanks to Rain, our family may become the foremost magical family in the Empire. This boy is extraordinary." Kevin, as a father, admitted that he had nothing left to teach him. Just then, another person entered the room. Kevin requested that a message be sent to his father, the former head of the Ludwig family. He was seeking his guidance, humbly asking him to personally instruct his grandson, who possessed such overwhelming natural talent. The messenger smiled and replied, "You're sparing no effort for the young master, aren't you? Very well, I will carry out your request." And so, spring ended, and the rainy summer arrived. Dark clouds blanketed the continent, pouring down endless rain day after day. Rain was busier than ever during that summer. By day he studied magic with Helen, while also teaching Cirrus the basics whenever he had time. By night he devoted himself to training his physical strength and refining his spells. The development of modern magic, as taught by Helen and recorded in the books, was truly astonishing to him. For someone who had lived 300 years ago, it was shocking. Many complex formulas had been simplified, and not only was the activation time reduced, his magical power had also increased greatly. The level of magic had improved tremendously compared to what it had been 30 years ago. He realized that he might even lose to a modern 4-star mage, and it was absolutely impossible for him to become a 7-star mage in this era. With his current state, he needed far greater power and far more knowledge. So Rain made a request to his father. He said he wanted to go to the magical world to study. Naturally, his parents were shocked. Cirrus asked curiously, "What is this magical world?" Rain explained, "It's where the Golden Rose is, the best magical university in the Empire. Delaw, I want to go there to study magic." But Cirrus protested. "No way. Absolutely not. He's not going. He's not. Kevin, however, told him that it wasn't possible. Rain was only 10 years old. It was far too early for him to leave home. Children from magical families were only allowed to enroll in Dale at the age of 16. It was simply too soon. Kevin then added that there was something even more important. He held out a letter that had just arrived from Rain's grandfather. Helen, who was busy stuffing herself with meat, suddenly choked and asked, "What did you just say?" Kevin scolded her. "Clean your mouth before you speak." Rain blinked in surprise. "Wait, my grandfather?" Kevin explained, "Yes. In the Ludwig family, he is one of the few who awakened both Belidius and Belcurious." Rain thought in astonishment, "So he's the one who awakened Belcurious. Scala Ludwig." Kevin continued, "Your grandfather has invited you personally. He will teach you Belcus himself. Before you even think about the magical world, you must first visit him." A few days later, Rain was already at his grandfather's castle. The first thing Scala did upon meeting him was cast a spell. The entire room shook under its pressure. Rain exclaimed, "What the hell are you doing?" Scala summoned an incredibly powerful magic. Rain immediately thought of ways to defend himself. The old man was clearly serious, but in the next instant, the magic Rain had prepared simply vanished from his hands. "This," Scala said, "is Belcus. It allows the user to control visible magic at will." Rain was stunned. Scala then asked, "Do you want to try as well? But remember, mastering Belcurious is not the end. To wield it properly, the caster must understand it completely." Rain replied, "Right now I can only perform high-speed calculations for a 3-star spell." Scala nodded. "That alone is impressive. Still, Belcurious demands immense magical power. With your current state, you're still a bit far from it." But Rain smiled. "It's just a long road, isn't it? Not impossible. I want you to show me that path." Before Kevin could excuse himself, Scala stopped him. "My initial greeting was rather rude. I apologize. You are sincerely welcome in my home." Then, after confirming Rain's aptitude, Scala invited his son to share a drink with him later. Kevin was deeply moved. It had been a long time since his father spoke to him with such warmth. Later, the training began outside. Scala declared, "After this training, you will be able to wield Belcurious freely. Read this incantation carefully. Do not make a mistake. In real combat, a single slip would already mean death." Rain barely avoided being struck by Scala's lightning, but even then, Scala had to admit, the boy had talent. Whenever Rain learned one thing, he immediately grasped many others. He was a true genius, someone who could master in a single day what would take others an entire month. Now, all that remained was for him to master the use of his eyes and withstand the strain of magic. Scala told him, "During this training, you must risk your life if you wish to grow strong enough." Rain nodded. He understood and agreed. Then Scala warned, "I will throw a fireball now. If you cannot dodge it, you will die." Instead of dodging, Rain stood firm. Scala launched a massive fireball straight at him. At that moment, Rain managed to activate Belidius. The fireball raced toward him and Scala did nothing to stop it. Rain knew he had to interpret the opponent's magic and manipulate it with Belidius. With tremendous effort, his eyes even bleeding, Rain finally succeeded. The magic transformed before him into a numerical code. He thought, Bell Curious has been activated as well. The entire universe is turning into equations, pouring directly into my mind. Now I just need to alter these formulas. He noticed that the magic circle consisted of two triangles with a size of 17 axes and a range of 23 kilometers. When he solved the equation, the fireball simply vanished before his eyes. Exhausted, Rain collapsed, but his grandfather caught him. Scala said, "You did very well. Now all you need is a little more magical power." I can hardly believe it. You awakened Belkos at the age of 14. I myself only achieved it at 39. This boy, he may truly rewrite the history of the Empire. Later, Scala told Rain that he would not interfere with whatever life he chose to live. But he recommended, when you turn 16, make sure you enroll in Delight. If you graduate at the top of Delight,